All right. Well, welcome everybody, and good morning if you're here in the US, good evening if you are over in Asia, and good afternoon if you're joining us from Europe. I am super excited about the conversation we're going to have today with Beth. So I got the chance, gosh, I don't know, I've known Beth and heard of Beth for years, probably before she even knew who I was, because Beth has been talking about the power of redox with animals for a long time. And I used to jump on her webinars and learn from her when I first started with the SIA. And now, gosh, fast forward all of these years, what a pleasure it is to get to interview you. So Beth, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's wonderful. I always love to coordinate with you. You're the star.
I don't know about all that. I'd say you are, but I'll say this. Let's give everybody your background. So I got the pleasure of learning a little bit about how you've spent the last 50 years of your life and all that your involvement is with the animal community, horses specifically. So can you give everybody a little bit of insight into your professional background?
Sure. Well, it's actually, I hesitate to say it, but it's been longer than 50 years. I started getting paid to ride horses when I was 14. So this has been my career, riding horses my entire life. I was blessed to have met my husband when I was still a teenager. We set up shop together and have been in the horse business for close to 50 years now, and married 45 of those years coming up in December. So it's been a wild ride, and we absolutely love what we do. However, if in my professional background with horses is kind of focused on, I was in hunters and jumpers when I was younger, and buying and selling hunters and jumpers. And then I really found that I absolutely love like kindergarten energy. I love young horses. I love starting them and helping them kind of learn the facts of life, basically. And so now we have evolved into teaching young racehorses, yearlings and 2-year-olds that we just start out. I call it teaching equine preschool. So it's something that we really are passionate about. However, I have always had a social conscience issue. You know, I've always tried to volunteer with my community. I was very active in my kids' education. I was on every board of everything I could be on at school and things. And then they went off to college, as children are wont to do. And I kind of felt a void in my life, and I was looking to try to find a way to help other people, but I didn't want to go back to school. And I've never been employed by anyone else in my life. I didn't want to go work for someone else. So I was really at a loss, and I stumbled into network marketing with some wonderful products. And it was absolutely the best thing that's happened is in this chapter of my life. ASEA, I actually found a different company, I always call that as my training to find out.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then so that I could recognize it, when I found ASEA, I recognized what an incredible and unique company this is. And it just took my heart. As soon as I learned about the science, I love the science. I have a wonderful friend who was a family practice physician, and he and I had always been kind of trading wellness stories because he was very holistically minded. And he called me one day and said, I think I found the greatest breakthrough in my lifetime in medical science. This is the future of medicine. And I said, I have never heard you say that. That is incredible. What is the stuff? I want it. I'll take it, whatever you say, because he was so passionate about the science, what he'd found out about the science. He'd only started the product and started researching it, and went to Utah to meet the founders. And this was in 2010, February. Wow. So this was 9 years before the official launch. Yes, at the very, very beginning. I immediately jumped, just loved it. I said, I came in saying, I had no idea this was going to change me physically, because in my mind, I thought I was 100% healthy. I said, I just want Bill and I to be on this because we want to, train horses until we're 90. and this is going to keep us younger longer. And I had no concept. I didn't wait to see if the product was going to work. I didn't wait to see what was going to happen. I just started telling everybody about it. I said, this is the coolest science you've ever seen. It's 100% healthy. And then we started talking about every living cell works the same way. It's 100% healthy. Let's try it on all the animals and see what happens. And back in those days, we had no tools. So the only thing we had was a network, the small network that was building rapidly, saying, oh, I tried this and this worked, and I tried this and this worked. And we were all so giddy almost because of all the miracles that we now, hopefully we never take them for granted, but we've seen so many of them that
Yeah,
you know, it
beautiful.
was very exciting.
Yeah, so I mean, Beth, when I heard you've been part of this for, it's like, yeah, since the beginning, before they officially launched. And I love that you just immediately started educating people and sharing that enthusiasm. And then very quickly that moved into the animal community. So tell us a little bit. I think the number one question everybody has is, well, is Redox safe for animals?
Exactly. And the number one thing to remember about every time you ask a question about an animal is all living cells work the same way. So anything that you have read or seen or heard about what has affected people is also going to affect animals. My daughter is a research scientist veterinarian, and she is very, very careful about saying, you can't, you know, just because this drug, you can't, because an aspirin makes you feel better, you can't give it to your dog. And you have to be very careful between species of drugs and things like that. You do not have to worry about that with ASEA. ASEA is 100% safe. It's been proven by third-party labs, everything. So when we find that and you read those safety studies, you just can extrapolate that into animals.
Beautiful. So how much do you give an animal? Is it based on their weight, their size, their age? You know, how do you know, and where do you start?
I think one of the most common misconceptions is to say, okay, well, I drink 8 ounces a day. My horse is going to have to drink 2 bottles a day. That is not the case, because you'll all be relieved to hear that's not the case, because ASEA is not weight specific. What I always say that's the question that I get asked the most is, oh, you know, my animal is this, how much do I give them? And I kind of go, a 8-pound cat is going to be slightly different than a horse, like say, but it really is predicated by how sick they are and how old they are. Very much the same as people. We have a maintenance dose that kind of varies. I think my 10-pound cat gets about 12 milliliters a day, and he just gets it in well, we'll talk about that later, how we administer it, but he gets 12 milliliters a day. My 25-pound dog gets about an ounce a day, because he's getting older. Again, he's getting older. So they found that the sweet spot with horses is about 8 ounces a day. So it's very, unless they're really struggling, unless they have a serious disease, or they're, you know, getting really, really old, and you want to help that kind of inflammation that happens with age.
Yeah. And I saw a hand go up. Remember, guys, if you've got questions, put them into the chat. So I am watching over on this screen. I've got Facebook, and I'm seeing John Stringer's excitement about horses. And then over here, we've got the chat going. So if you've got questions specific for Beth, please put them in the chat. We're not bringing anybody on. And I just wanted to remind you of that. So the next question is, you know, basically every animal might be having a different thing going on, kind of like humans. And so people want to know, well, you know, my dog, I just went to the vet and they've got X thing happening now, or, you know, my cat, I woke up and now it's got all this stuff, or it's losing its fur. You know, there's these specific issues that are happening. So how do you kind of help navigate, well, I've got this going on with my animal, what would you recommend? As well as, where can people find testimonials? Because I think that's something that, you know, with people a lot, we direct and say, hey, well, go look, you know, this does something different for everybody. Go look at somebody else that's had that issue. We've got it set up for people. Sure. Is there a space that people can go to and find a little bit more about animals and their experiences?
Sure. I think that's a great question, because early on, I think I was earmarked as the Redox animal person, because I was the first professional animal trainer that ever really signed up in ASEA. And I'm thrilled to have been earmarked in that capacity. I started very early on at Trish Winkler's suggestion. We started a monthly teleconference where I would just bring 2 or 3 people in to tell their stories. Again, back then, that's really all we had. It was sort of like, oh, tell your story. Oh man, I gave it to so-and-so and guess what happened? It was really exciting. And that went on for probably 7 years or so, but they couldn't be archived. So they would be recorded for a month and we would share them for a month, and then they'd be recorded over with the next call. And then technology caught up with us and we changed over, or we caught up with technology, let's put it that way. And we changed over to a Zoom format. And then we were able to archive. So if you go to animalwebinar.com, and every month I would feature one person who would tell wonderful stories, animal stories, along with a lot of pictures. The visual aspect of it is really important because animals can't talk to you and tell you how they feel, but pictures are worth 1,000 words. So it's very visual. It's animalwebinar.com. It is password protected. Do you want me to tell everybody the password?
Yeah, you can share the password.
Okay, it's associate with a capital A. And then you kind of have to sign in twice. You get to the page of the webinar and then you click on archives and you have to sign that same thing in again. So it is really, there's probably 40 of them there now. So because we have a really good library and they're all thumbnailed, so you can kind of look down through. If you're horse oriented, you could look at the horse ones and dog and that kind of thing. And we have enough as a library that I stopped doing them monthly. However, when I hear people come up to me at some ASEA events and say, oh man, I've got so many great animal stories, I say, great, let's set up a special webinar. And we have another one, and then we'll post it on animalwebinar.com. So hopefully that will help. And then I have a Facebook page that is ASEA Healthy Pets. That is also a closed group just because we want to be compliant with the FDA. So you just have to ask to be invited, and I approve everybody. So everybody can come onto that page. And that just is a whole lot of stories. Again, it's very much like I orchestrated it to be almost to pattern Healthy Self, so that it's just people telling their animal stories, again, with a lot of photographs, because that speaks volumes with animals.
Yes.
And then the last one is, you might want to tell them about the last one.
Yeah, well, the last one encompasses all of it. So the link tree that I just put in the chat, I put it over on Facebook, I put it here on Zoom, and thank you to Sandy for letting me know that the chat was disabled. I was like, why is no one talking on here? The chat was disabled on Zoom. It should be enabled now, so you could put your questions in the chat. There is a link tree that we created that has all of these resources for animals. And so you can go in, you click it, it takes you to the animalwebinar.com. It takes you to the Facebook group. And so that's just housed. It's just easy then, one click, you got everything you need. And it also has a couple of other resources, like a link to an FAQ, which is something that Beth did with me the other day. And it was just a series of questions that people have. And I'm putting the link just right to YouTube as well in both places here. But again, that link tree has everything that you need. So it's a one-stop shop for any questions that people might have when it comes to animals. So excellent. Thank you, Beth, for sharing that and for sharing all the resources. So the next number one question is, all right, so I've got it. It's safe. I know what to do. I'm going to use it. Okay, my dog won't drink it. Okay, my cat walks away from it. Okay, so how is it that you get the animals to use the ASEA, or what are the options you have if your animal says like, yeah, no thanks, and walks away?
Well, it always strikes me as amazing that many dogs, as funny as ASEA smells, many dogs will drink it out of a bowl. So that's the first thing I would suggest. If you're trying to give it to your dog, please put it in a clean glass bowl, not metal, please. And many of them, offer it to them and they'll drink it up. I have a very finicky dog. He's a rescue dog. He is like, he doesn't trust anything. Everything you ask him, he goes, wait a minute. And he's, 13 years old. He's a farm dog and runs 900 miles a day. And he's just very active, and we want to keep him that way. So I started him on ASEA, and I knew it was going to be a challenge. What we have found, most dogs will, if you take something, if they won't drink it out of a bottle, and we're talking about dogs first, and then we'll go into other species, but if they won't drink it out of the dish, then you just put something that they'll view as a treat that's kind of smelly. I suggest Parmesan cheese, or if they love shredded chicken and you use that as a treat, then put a little shredded chicken. Yeah, there you go. A little shredded chicken in, and they'll always drink up the ASEA along with their treat. Well, then each day you can just pull a little bit out and put a little less treat and a little more ASEA. And then I've heard many stories about people say that works like a charm, that they'll start drinking their ASEA without the chicken or without the treat. Yes, we are told don't ever, you would basically 10 minutes before or after, don't eat or drink anything. Of course, that's the optimal way to get the molecules in. However, my dog says, okay, no treat, no ASEA. So I use a tiny, I've gotten it down to about the size of a pencil eraser. I drop a little bit of tuna, which is very smelly, in there. And it's just one little drop and he goes, yay. And he drinks it all up immediately, about an ounce, which is a lot for, in a bowl. And he'll drink it all up right away. Yes, we might lose a few molecules along the way, but at least he gets the rest of them in his body. Cats are, of course, notorious. I have heard wonderful stories about cats that get they get really sick, or they get hurt, they get in a fight, and they come and they'll drink ASEA right out of a bowl when they're hurt or ill. And then as soon as they get better, they walk away. And which is really cool. I mean, because cats, you like those mice, you can't, cats don't drink something just because you ask them to. We'll put it that way. But what I did with my cat, it was a remarkable result, because he was struggling with some issue. And I just found that if I just propped him up on the counter, tucked him under my arm, supported his chin, and I put a plastic syringe in the side of his mouth, and every morning I just squirted in the side of his mouth, and that he just would, he'd drink it up. And that seems to work really well for cats. Some cats, of course, fight and they don't like it. The interesting thing about that is, of course, we have Renew 28. So we have that chance to put in Renew 28 on animals that absolutely say they will not drink the molecules. And you never want to get to where you're fighting with your animal in order to get these in them, because that's no fun. So there are other options. You want me to go into large animals as well now?
Yeah, for sure. I think absolutely.
Okay. Horses, obviously horses. If you've ever seen my animal presentation when I go to events, I also go into a wonderful story about cows, but horses are by far the most prevalent large animals that we talk about. And what happens when you give a horse orally? Well, obviously, orally is best. And when you give a horse something orally, everything that is made to be administered orally is in a very viscous, sticky, pasty kind of a substance, because they'll try to spit it out. It's a natural response. So you have to put it way back in their throats and squirt it in, and it kind of sticks to their mouths, and then they'll swallow whatever it is they're supposed to. Well, obviously we can't make ASEA into a gelatinous substance. So, and given the Renew that way isn't reasonable. So what we found, and when I would give it I've tried giving it orally, and then you hold up the head, and of course it will go through the lining of the mouth and it will be absorbed into the system. But when you drop that heavy head, they always spit a little out, and it kills me. It killed me. I don't want to waste those valuable molecules. So early on, there was a man who had draft horses that were competitive draft horses that would in pulling competitions. And he had this brilliant idea. I wish I could claim it, but I won't. He had this brilliant idea to give it rectally, because the rectal tissue is just as absorbent as the lining of the mouth. And the molecules don't have to be metabolized. They will go into the body, be absorbed, and go wherever there's an imbalance in the body. So it doesn't matter which end you put it in. So I just use a dose syringe and administer it rectally, and then you don't lose any molecules along the way. And horses don't mind that at all. It's much more squeamish to people than horses. Horses they don't care.
Beautiful. Someone was just actually asking a little bit about that in the chat, and we'll get to your all specific questions here in a moment. But a couple others that I think are pretty common, like why hasn't my vet heard about this, or why is my vet not recommending this, at their clinic?
That's a great question. And I think it's very important because I get asked this a lot. I'm so excited about starting my ASEA business. The first person I want to call is my vet. And the problem with that is that the veterinary arm of the FDA is even more stringent and more restricted than the human one. So it is illegal to market a human supplement for animal consumption. So they cannot by law be telling their patients about it. They can't say, this is what we need to do. They are not allowed to do that. So can they say, this, I heard about this thing, can they get around it? Yes. I mean, I shouldn't say that publicly, but there are ways to phrase things where they can say, I heard about something you might want to try or whatever, but they can't use it as a marketing tool in their practice.
Okay. Now, what about, we know that sometimes when people start ASEA, they detox a little bit. Is that something that we see in animals? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. One of the things I think that shocks us the most is I don't believe we've ever seen, I have never heard of in my 12 and a half years of hearing a lot of animal stories. The interesting thing is about maybe 5 years in, we started recognizing that no one has ever seen really a detox. It doesn't seem to ever have an adverse reaction for any reason, no matter how sick the dog is. It's really pretty remarkable. So for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure why not, but animals do not seem to detox so I wouldn't think that would be something, I'm never going to say never, but I wouldn't think that would be something that anyone would have to worry about from the get-go. I think if you are concerned about your animal and you want to try this, go for it 100%.
Awesome. Now let's talk about the gel. So, one concern is, my dog, I put it on him and he licks it off. So the question is twofold. Number one, is it okay if you rub the gel on and the animal licks it off? And number two, how could you use the gel, or where are places on the body that you could use it to get, absorption, or ideas behind using the gel with the animals?
Sure. Actually, well, I should preface my comments by saying on the tube, it says for topical use only. However, there is nothing in that tube. They have to do that for legal issues, but there is nothing in that product that is going to hurt you or your animal or anyone, because it's just a carrying agent. It's like a little clay that's a carrying agent that makes it so that the molecules can be absorbed topically. I would strongly encourage using both, but it's a wonderful option if your animal absolutely will not tolerate the liquid. So the problem with Renew is that you have to get it into the skin in order for those molecules to work. If you wipe it on the top of your cat's coat, it's not going anywhere because it's on top. Now, if they lick it off the top of their coat, like I've heard people say that with dogs and cats, they'll put it on their paws, and the first thing they do is lick their paws because they have this sticky stuff on them. And so and especially cats will lick their paws right away. And that's perfectly fine. That's fine if they lick it off. However, if you want, especially with cats and dogs, actually, the best place is inside their ears. You can rub it inside their ears because there's no fur there, and it will go straight into the system. You can put it, I've heard people say they rub it on their dog's gums, which is perfectly fine. Again, it doesn't matter if they ingest it, and it will go through the lining of those, the lining of the gingiva and get into their bodies. So it's really, or the pads of the feet, anywhere that they don't have, that you can get through the fur onto the skin. And I always say, look, be creative, use it wherever you want to use it. You can't go wrong. If you get those molecules in them, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I've had other people share the belly button is like a really good spot to put it as well, and can absorb in there.
Yes, we talked about that. You and I talked, you said that the other day. I had never thought about that, but of course I've heard that with other things. They say that's because it's sort of like opening in, when you think about it. I actually was yesterday, went into the barn and I was looking and thinking, where is the belly button on a horse? It's not as easy to see. And I thought,
that is simple.
I wrote that back there. It's really interesting. But that's a great idea. Again, being really creative and figuring out how to get those molecules in.
Beautiful. Well, last question I have for you, and then there's been some questions that have come in the chat. And guys, some of your questions are lengthy, so it's going to take me a minute to read through them.
Sure.
So the last question is about performance. So we've been talking a little bit about, health and maximizing your pet's health or when they're getting older, et cetera. But, the other piece to ASEA is the power for athletes. And there are some animals that are athletes. So does that translate to them as well?
100%. Every living cell works the same way. Guess what? It works great. Again, you heard me touch on that a little bit when I was telling the story of the man who had draft horses. And he said it was really, really remarkable how much their performance increased. Performance and recovery. Those are the two words we talk about with athletes all the time. That translates directly to horses. The problem in my line of work is I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to the racetrack. There's people there with, 50 horses. If I can get them giving ASEA to all their horses, of course, that would be a wonderful thing. However, the problem with that is that number one, they don't believe it. They don't think that's going to help their animal, but also it takes a while. It takes a while and people don't stop enough. I shouldn't say this, but horse people are notoriously very, very focused on horses only and don't really look beyond that, especially at a racetrack when they're trying to make money by a competitive edge, et cetera, et cetera. You'd think they jump on this. However, what I will say is that at the racetrack, thoroughbred racing, a average race, a mile race is a minute 36 seconds. And there are so many variables. So I had somebody give a horse that wasn't performing well. And he was early on, he was the only one that would do this for me. And I gave him the ASEA and I said, just give it to this filly and see what she thinks. And she won a race. Well, he said, oh no, it was much cooler. And she liked the track conditions better. It didn't have anything to do with ASEA. So because it's such a short period of time, it really gets discounted. The value of what ASEA has done for horses but the longer the competition, endurance racing, anything like that, any kind of that has a period of time, a longer period of time, then any competitor will see a difference in their horse. We now have seen performance horses, jumpers and things like that. They'll give them, and what athletes usually do is they have a maintenance dose that they take every day, and then with strong training or something, or a race or something coming up, they'll drink more, and that's really what has happened and has really seemed to the people that are willing to do it, especially endurance horses. And the endurance racing is really fun because the endurance racing, like over 50 miles, and you have to have mandatory vet checks, and they check vital signs. They check, respiratory, and how quickly they cool down and how quickly they do this. And they do all these vet checks periodically through the race. And the people that have been endurance riders that have reported to me have said it's amazing the difference in their vitals during their vet checks, and which is really cool, because then you have kind of like concrete proof that it's healthy. So that's really cool too. But I promise, what I usually tell people if they say, well, there's no videos about performance horses, and there are there's a couple that some owners that have trained their own horses that have found, and they have shared on the animal webinar site. But what I always tell, every living cell works the same. You can hear me saying that over and over. So I show people the human athletes. There's one called Outperform Yourself that is absolutely remarkable. And that one really is the one I use. It's the oldest, I think it's the oldest athlete tape we have. And it's the most profound. And I tell people, I say, watch this. The same thing happens to your horse, I promise. So that's pretty cool.
All right. Well, thank you for that and super insightful. I think we'll wrap up here with just a handful of questions that came in while you were talking. So the first one is, my friend's golden retriever has a lower lumbar spinal stenosis. They're getting an MRI to detect more in the area. Would it be too drastic to shave the area in order to apply the Renew 28 directly there, or use the ASEA spray bottle right there and spray that area?
Oh, we haven't talked about the spray bottle. I need to go back to that, but absolutely. If you can, I always tell people that when they say, "Oh, my horse has a, has a swelling, there's no break in the skin, there's no nothing, but there's a swelling." I'll say, well, the best thing you can do is shave that area, because the closer to the skin you can get that Renew 28, the better. I think that is by far, it's certainly not drastic at all. That's by far the best idea to get the molecules into the body. The spray bottle is something that I use a lot in the barn. I know that we get kind of stuck on the idea that our Renew 28 is more concentrated and you can put it topically. I have found, especially working with young racehorses, because they can be a little flighty and a little fractious. And when they have an illness or an injury that it hurts to touch, I'll use the spray bottle, or something like eyes. Their eyes, I've lots of horses, bump eyes and get eye issues. And I'll use that spray bottle for that. Not only because it's painful to touch, and I don't want to worry them or upset them any more than they already are when they're hurt. But that spray seems to be very soothing. I'm talking about, young racehorses that are absolutely, anything, if you do make a fast motion to them, they're going to flinch. And you go in there and I just pet them. I didn't think it was going to work because of the sound of the spray, but it's a very soft sound. And I just kind of I go before I start, and I get it. And they do this a little bit. And then once they feel it, they lean. This happens every time, and it tickles me every time. They'll lean toward me and they'll say, "Oh, that feels so good." And the same thing with open wounds or something. If you can drench that area, and sometimes if you have an open wound, I don't want to touch it because I don't want to get anything else. I don't want to get anything aside from the molecules into that open wound. And we just drench it over and over and over. Every hour or so, we just drench it with ASEA, and it works beautifully. It's really wonderful.
A similar question. So someone was asking about an 11-pound Pomeranian that's got potentially a collapsed trachea, and they're wondering, is it better to shave the area and put the gel right over, or can the same effect still happen if they're just drinking it and, rubbing the gel in the ears?
Absolutely. The same effect can happen. I think we do get a little bit, again, this is what's nice about having the historical perspective of, I was actively accumulating animal stories well before we ever had Renew 28. And people get kind of stuck on the idea that, oh, well, I need Renew 28 because it's stronger or it's more concentrated. You don't. Use those molecules however you can get them in the body. You don't have to topically put it. Wherever you put it on the body, if that's the area of issue, those molecules are going to get there. I promise. You don't have to put it. One of the beautiful things about this is you don't have to pick and choose where the problem is. Your body does that for you when it goes in their mouth. So I would strongly suggest putting it anywhere on their body, because the molecules are going to get where they need to go.
Perfect. Well said. This question is about using another product. So they asked specifically about colloidal silver, but I would open it up to say any other medicine. This person's asking about, I use colloidal silver with my cat that has kitty herpes. How do I balance using both?
Very good question. ASEA, it cannot be overused. It cannot hurt anything in any way. What it does is it helps our cells be more efficient. So any protocol you have your animal on, we never say don't do what your vet says. Whatever you choose to do and however you choose to treat whatever problem your animal has, we say great, go. We applaud whatever choices you make. However, ASEA you don't have to stop doing everything else to see if ASEA works, but ASEA will help the body utilize whatever else you're doing much better. So for instance, we find that people who are on medications, they'll find that sometimes their medications, they're with their doctor's approval, their medications can be cut back a little bit because their bodies are utilizing the medication they're being given so much better. So the same thing will happen to any kind of other supplement that you're giving your animal. I think his body will be able to use it that much better. So go for it. Yeah.
All right. This person has a horse, 28-year-old retired racehorse that has a vertical crack in its hoof. They've been applying the gel. They've been doing liquid rectally for 2 weeks, and they're wondering if you have any experience. I'm guessing she's asking maybe like timeline, or if that would be effective for that kind of thing.
Hopefully you're not applying it to the outside of the hoof, because that's not going to help. That's just dead. That's dead cells. That's dead. That's just like a horn. That will not be absorbed to the outside of the hoof. The only way to help hoof growth is and you probably, the cornet band, if you're a horse person, the cornet band is right where the hoof meets the ankle, meets where the skin starts. And so if I were her, I would shave that part, because that cornet band that's kind of thick hair. I would shave that part and I would rub renew into that cornet band, rather than, there's no point in putting it on the outside of the hoof, because it can't be absorbed there. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Ingesting it is really, really important. I think that's great. She's doing a good job.
Someone was asking, what's the athlete video that you're speaking of, and can you post the link?
Well, it's on youtube.com, ASEA video, or it was last time. And there was a shortened version. The one I like, it's called Outperform Yourself. And I don't know if you want to put that in the chat. It's called Outperform Yourself, and it is 6 minutes and 41 seconds long. That's a little bit longer. That there are a couple 2-minute versions, and I love that 6-minute version. It's fabulous. It has, not only does it have athletes performing better, but it has coaches saying, this is what I do for my athletes because of, and it's really cool. I love that video. So that's the one I'd use.
Nice. Okay. Someone is asking if you could actually give comments on cows. So they must have cows and want to know a little bit about cows.
Cool. Well, 99% of the people here can take a little break, because most people don't care about cows. But one of my best cow story is that a professional dairy farmer called me and said, I got this incredible story. Not only that, I have a wonderful organic dairy farmer who is actually a wonderful leader in ASEA, and she was using it with, I'm going to be very careful to be compliant here, but it's when there's an infection and problem in the udder of cows that are milking cows. And it's very, very difficult to treat. And you have to, especially if you're a commercial dairy farm, you have to stop. You have to give them antibiotics. You have to test every day. You have to stop for 2 weeks, stop milking for 2 weeks. And then you have to test to make sure the antibiotics are out of the system before you can put the animal back into production. He has found, and my other friend has said this many times, that the Renew 28 and, giving orally or rectally, the Renew 28 and the ASEA also has helped clear that up immediately. And there's no worry about testing to make sure the antibiotics are out of the system. So it's really this, and especially for an organic dairy farmer, you can imagine it's wonderful, because she doesn't have to worry about those drugs. But the story that this man wanted to share with me, those of you who know dairy farming, as soon as the calf is born, they pull the calves off the mother immediately, because she has to continue to be a productive member of the team. And so they pull the calves off and they feed the calves by hand. They feed them like a calf formula. And one of the most dangerous times of their lives are when they're very, very young. Within a couple days, they get a really loose stool. and they can dehydrate very quickly, and it's about 50% lethal. They lose a big chunk of animals, and they can usually they have these calves in a big, my grandfather was a dairy farmer, so usually they have them in the big room, and they can trade that. It must be some kind of a virus. I've never really understood where it came from, but they can send it amongst themselves. So you can literally lose calves pretty quickly. And he said when he was first kind of playing with ASEA, his first calf came down and started getting that loose stool it's just like water, and he knew he had trouble, and he started giving ASEA orally. That was before we knew anything about the rectal, but even the calves, you can usually get it enough in where you can get it mostly into their bodies, and he said it cleared up in a day.
Wow.
And that was really, and he went through, and he said that's happened. He said over 20 times that's happened, and you don't have to give it for very long. You just get them over that initial. Obviously, there's something about their immune system getting used to the outside world that kind of eliminates that problem, so that starts going in, and that's when the problem is. And then if you catch it early like that and can give the molecules early, that immune system can say, oh, I get it, and they can learn how to fight that off.
Beautiful.
So he kept saying, tell everybody, because it's the financial benefits from all of that were,
no kidding.
staggering. Yeah, it was very cool.
Oh my gosh, you've been saving lives, literally. That's powerful. I don't think I'd ever heard that story. Okay, so the other comment in here, someone asked, how much do you give according to size of pet or horse? And I think this person has jumped on late. You can go back and watch the beginning. We answered that. It's also in the FAQ, which you can find on the link tree, but basically it's not size specific. Just depends really on age, just like with people. And the very last question we had is this something that's good for dogs that have anxiety before a nail trim? Great question. That's one thing I don't talk about very often. And I'm so happy somebody said this, because that's one of our personal stories. We don't own a lot of horses, because when you own horses, they cost money. And when you ride for other people, they pay you. So we try to keep our own horses down, but we had a performance in a racehorse that my husband has his trainer's license, and he runs, he races horses on his hobby. It's like a, busman's holiday, but he loves it. So we had one horse that was very, very nervous, and I'd heard that it helps anxiety with people. Again, remember that when you hear something that happens positive with people, please understand that chances are it's going to help animals as well. And so I'd heard about the people that say, oh, I feel so much better. I feel so much more calm. And we started giving it to this horse, and it made an incredible difference. He was amazing. Within 5 days, he was a different horse. He was, and I can, there's a little bit more detail. My story is also in the animalwebinar.com. So I would say, specifics before, Ellen Welk is actually writing in as a comment, and she is my dog specialist. She's a professional dog breeder, and she's fabulous. There are several different videos of hers on Animal Webinar. But what happens is, I've heard people talk about before the 4th of July for fireworks. I've heard people talk about, anxiety about nails, and it has really been a remarkable benefit. So if that does help, whoever wrote that, and it helps, report back to me, and I'll add your story to the list. So it's wonderful. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, guys, this has been so fun. The amount of stories that have come in during this, we didn't get a chance, if you're catching the recording, maybe see some on Facebook, but the things that have been coming in through Zoom, how people have been using this. Ellen was sharing what I did with stillborn puppies that brought 2 of them back to life. Like, what in the world do we have our hands on? I think sometimes when I hear about what these redox molecules are doing, it is the breath of life. It's the spark of life. And it's amazing all the ways that we can utilize it. So Beth, thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing it all with us this morning. And thank you everyone here in the ASEA community globally for connecting in and having this conversation. And we hope that you guys have a beautiful weekend. The recording will be posted. It's in the ASEA VIP customer group. Once a month, we do a special event in that group. under hashtag interviews. You can go there and see all of the backlog and archive of all of the interviews that we do. Now, if people aren't on Facebook, a CU United YouTube, a CU United Vimeo channel. This recording will be posted there as soon as it downloads and uploads. So give me a couple of hours and it'll be up there so you can share it. So thank you everyone for coming here, and Beth, thank you so much.
Thank you, my dear. It's all